Okay, so we can talk about communication and the importance of communication at the workplace. Today's learning objectives that we have for today are describe what managers need to know about communicating effectively. Of course, technology helps communicate, but sometimes technology can become an impediment in the way we communicate, and discuss temporary issues that we might have in in organizational context regarding communication itself. So, learning objective one: define what managers need to know about communicating effectively. Now, basically, we are going to go and look at the definition or the process of communication. So, if you want to define communication as a simple process, it's transfer of understanding and meaning from one person to another. So, I want to say something to you. How well can I say it? It means that me and you should have a common language to share whatever I want to share with you, and we should have common interests that you feel interested in listening to me, and perhaps you should have some background of the context and the content of what I want to tell you. So understanding and meaning depends not just on the content itself but on the context, and it also depends on the sender and the receiver. So that's how complex communication can be. So let's go and look at communication process itself. So as I was saying, you do have to have a sender, and definitely on the other side you have a receiver. So if I'm the sender in this case, you are the receivers. It'll be best if we have a strong feedback as well. You people, all the students in my class as of now, if you are all the receivers, they should be active feedback from your side. Only can then the sender know that whatever he's trying to communicate has reached you the way it should, that there has not been any kind of distortion, and that things are clear. So
Excuse me.
obviously, as a sender, I'm encoding the message that I have, or the content of this class that I have with me. I'm trying to encode it with the language skills that I have, and then I put it across using a channel. The message is coming across through a channel. In today's class, it's via Zoom. Otherwise, it could be face-to-face communication. But today it's using technology. Thanks to technology. If we didn't have this kind of technology during the pandemic, I think we all would have suffered. Like your graduation could be delayed, your academic progression could be delayed. Perhaps I would be out of job for temporary reasons because I'm not teaching or doing my job. But thanks to technology, I keep my job. We still can teach, and you can learn, and you can continue to progress in your academic careers. So obviously the channel can depend whether we want to use face-to-face communication, whether we want to use emails, written communication, verbal communication, or technology-based communication. It depends. Video conferencing, teleconferencing. And then of course, you're receiving this message that I'm encoding and trying to explain today's class. You're receiving. And in the process of you being a receiver, you're also decoding the message. There could be my message could have explicit meaning, which I want to communicate to you. There could be an implied meaning as well, a subtle subliminal message that I am transferring. So, as a receiver, if you're not attentive, if you're not an active listener, you might be inattentive, and therefore you cannot decode the message that I'm trying to send across to you. And when you're not able to do it properly, the decoding itself, you're saying there is noise. This noise can be because of the kind of distractions that you have. I know sometimes I have had my students sit in my class in Zoom, and they're actually turning off their video and the audio, and they're happily listening to some music. Sometimes when they go unmute, I can listen to their music. It's sad because that's typically a distraction. It's what we call as noise in communication. So your decoding is never going to happen. You're listening to music. There's no way you're going to understand the kind of message that I'm sending across in my class. So noise can be there between how a sender can encode the choice of words, the kind of distractions in his or her mind. This can be noise. There could be noise in the channel itself, which we call as channel noise. And there could be noise or distractions in the way a receiver is decoding information. So communication is not that easy as you think. It's not straightforward because there are so many things as a process in communication, And at every process level, you might have variations, you might have distractions, you might have distortions. And when will a cycle of communication be complete? Only when there is an active feedback channel. Maybe not one, multiple feedback channels. You want to make doubly sure that the receiver is understanding what me as a sender is trying to send. That's very, very crucial. So it's important that you need to understand, communication is a cyclical process. Without the feedback channel, communication, there's no way to figure out if communication has been effective. If the receiver doesn't get the message across, the receiver is not going to initiate action. At the workplace, you need people to understand. You need your workers and subordinates and peer level employees to understand your message, to then be able to mobilize action and incentivize action, to follow up, and to make sure that activities, tasks, and jobs are accomplished. So communication is the key. Sadly, if you're aware of the nature of communication, it's only human beings for whom communication is not a natural process. The harder we try, perhaps we can get better, but we'll never ever be perfect. You know why? Because our context changes, our perceptions keep changing, our distractions are always there. So it's not easy that communication can be perfected, but the harder you try, the better it gets, and you need to continue to work at it. Now we're going with the first part of communication process, which is encoding. Now if you look carefully, encoding depends on skills, attitudes, knowledge, and social cultural systems that we have. Suppose me as an individual, if I'm good in my English speaking skills, I'm good as a speaker, I'm a good orator, it really helps trying to get my message across. So the more I practice making presentations, the more I practice my English speaking skills, and the more I work on my grammar and usage, and the more I can learn about the content that I want to communicate, it's better for me. So skills are very important in the encoding process. If you guys come back to me, I know you've been saying, sir, you teach really well. It's because I've invested time in improving my skills. It's not to say that I'm perfect. There is scope for improvement for everyone. I continue to strive to be a better human being as much as I continue to strive to be a better communicator. So, skill, very important in the encoding process. Attitudes. If I do not really respect my job, and if I do not respect and treat my students really well, it'll reflect in the quality of my encoding process. It'll reflect in my communication with you. But because I respect you with my every cell of my body, my attitude towards you is always positive, and that's why it helps me encode in a way which is respectful, in a way that is empathetic, and I understand things from the student's perspective, including the challenges that we face because of this remote learning opportunities that we have because of the pandemic situation. Knowledge. The more comfortable I am with my content itself. Suppose I've been given a topic to discuss. If it is for the first time I'm reading that particular topic, definitely my knowledge in that topic is limited, and therefore my encoding is limited. But if this is a topic that I'm really familiar with, it's also closely related to my research interests. I've taught this many times over. My knowledge is deeper, and therefore encoding my message today and speaking about communication is that much more easy. So obviously encoding depends on my knowledge of the topic that's being actually communicated. Social cultural system. Suppose you travel to the Middle East. There are certain things that you are not supposed to be saying and talking about, so you got to be aware of what's correct in the sense of, say, the social context or the cultural sensitivities that you should be aware of. So encoding depends on all these things. So next week you're making presentation, guys. In module 5, I have separate videos on presentation skills. It'll not be a bad idea to go to module 5 and you have videos on presentation skills. Please watch them. They're simple tips, not that you're not aware of. You're aware of all of those. I'm sure you've done a lot of presentations in your life. You might be good at it. But as I was saying, we all have an opportunity to improve. None of us is perfect. And communication by its nature is not natural to human beings, and we can never ever become perfect in communication. We always have scope for improvement. So go back and watch those videos. There's a little Harvard Business Review article there in module 5 that you might find it as an interesting read. So it's not a bad thing to do. I even took pains to do that because I've designed this course that is being evaluated by Everspring. And this course is going to go for quality assurance next week because the content is designed in a way that is very easy. There are course related material like slides are there. There are readings. There are videos, my lectures. So it's beautifully done with a lot of resources. So it's not a bad thing to go to module 5 and look at the importance of how you do presentations. Now, in the organizational context, I'm happy there is Alibaba at the background here in this picture. Formal channels versus informal channels. Look at this informal setting. The formal communication, the meetings, the countless number of meetings that we have these days, where you're dressed up in a suit and where you're wearing a tie and you're sitting and listening and you're supposed to be putting up presentations and talking. Those are formal channels of communication. My boss calls for a meeting. The other people in the university call for meetings. These are all formal channels of communication. But look at this picture that's there with Alibaba at the backdrop. This is a clear case of informal channels of communicating. They're sitting over a cup of coffee and talking casually, but they're still transacting something useful for the company. And informal channels are very quick. They're effective. So as much important your formal channels of communication are, you got to make sure you give enough ample opportunities for your employees so that they can have these informal discussions, whether it's a networking event or whether it's a luncheon that you're discussing most important issues, where you're having say orientation programs, or for new employees you do onboarding. Any of these things you can do it both formally and you can do it informally. So you might want to have formal activities followed up by informal activities so that you reinforce whatever you're trying to accomplish. Can somebody give me an example of informal channels of communication that have been effective in your experience?
Um, for me, I would say that we use something called Telegraph. It's I think it's Telegram or something like that. It's like a WhatsApp, and
Okay.
then we use it to communicate when I was in the military. So it
Okay.
was initially we're using WhatsApp, but then WhatsApp got infected, so we changed it to Telegram.
Okay, makes sense. And you want to maintain confidentiality of that information as well, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And then when we talk about, we spoke about different channels of communication, then we have the decoding and feedback. Again, when somebody receives that information from you, how are they able to decipher the meaning? How are they able to interpret the meaning? That's decoding. Suppose you speak to me about nuclear physics, for example. I might not understand everything. Even if I did understand, my understanding would be very peripheral. But if you talk about management to me, I get everything, whatever you're talking about. I can make better sense of it. I can perhaps act on it. I can help you with the analysis. But when it comes to biology or it comes to some other, natural sciences, my understanding is terrible. So obviously, my ability to decode a message is extremely poor. And of course, then the last element of communication, which I was saying makes the cycle complete, is the feedback. This feedback is the only thing that tells you whether your communication has been effective or not, whether you're being able to transfer that message across to the receiver has been successful or not. So every time I ask a question, if I have somebody in this group answering, it just gives me a feeling, oh, okay, there are people who are listening and there are people who understand and happy to participate and share their own personal experiences. So feedback channels, not one, but multiple. And I think we do a lot of breakout rooms and Zoom sessions these days so that we have smaller groups, better interaction amongst yourself, and an opportunity for your professor to come in and ask you feedback and give you inputs that might be helpful. Again, different types of communication, that's something that might interest us. Written communication versus verbal communication. Guys, please be mindful. Written communication is something that you see here on the top. It's tangible, verifiable, it has a permanent record stored for later reference. So you should be very, very, very careful, well thought out. You don't want to write stuff that you will be held accountable later and it can be used against you. So be extremely cautious. Every word that you say, the choice of words that you use, and the detail that you want to present, and the number of emails or people that you want to have on your email itself. Don't simply write emails and forward to all. That can put you in trouble. And especially if you're writing some very important email, take time, verify the facts. If it means calling somebody and making sure that you are understanding what you should be writing in the email, double check, cross check, because it's something that stays on record. Okay. But written communication has its own drawbacks. Time consuming, doesn't lend itself for feedback like face to face communication. So, but written email communication, very important. When you write a message, it should have detail, it should be clear, it should explicitly say what you want from the opposite person. It cannot be too long because people don't have time, but it cannot be too short to avoid all the specific details, which is important. So, written communication, email communication, it can be cumbersome. It can take away a lot of your time. You might never get an answer because people are inundated with tons and tons of email in their inbox. So sometimes it's helpful because you say, I sent out an email. Maybe it'll protect your back. It might not get you the result. Sometimes taking the phone, calling people, being personal and making sure they understand it, getting their feedback immediately is always nice. You write an email because it gives detail. You can attach a document. You can give the specifics, but follow up phone call sometimes might help, but not necessary. You will always get the right phone number to call. But if you do have it, please make that personal touch. Please make that personal contact. Yeah, the great point is,
Professor,
yep.
for you personally, what do you prefer, written or verbal communication when you work with the school?
Yeah, with the school, I prefer talking because talking actually lets them know what you're actually thinking. The meaning is clear. You have an opportunity to be asked questions and you have an opportunity to clarify and give more detail. And it just not tells about specific things, it also tells the approaches. You get an opportunity to explain the approach, the strategies, the implications, even if it's for 10-15 minutes. I know time is precious, but it gives a greater flexibility. Verbal communication, face to face communication, or even telephonic conversation cannot be completely replaced with just an email, because emails, you get hundreds of them, and sometimes you might not even see the email. And even if you did see, because you're tied up with so much work, you might be distracted. That's what we call noise. And then, people are not going to act. They'll say, oh, we have 100 different things to work on. So why are we going to prioritize your work? But if you made a phone call, you have a chance to explain the urgency and the importance of this particular thing that has to be accomplished. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree there. I prefer verbal rather than written.
Yeah, but when you write, when you choose to write, you know gather your evidence, have the right detail, make sure you're breaking it down into points, you make sure you're explaining what's being discussed, make sure what kind of action that you're trying to elicit from the opposite person. So it should be action driven, it should be very clear, but it can be at the same time too long. And don't make it
Can you
verbose.
Professor? Can you just send the email or do the written and then call just to confirm? Because sometimes you may
Right.
call the person that have not even had a chance to look at the email yet.
Right, that's perfectly the right thing to do. Especially if you're the boss and you're working with your team, it's not a bad thing to send out an email and with an attached document that for people to refer and to look at it, read it. And if you give a couple of days time so that everybody has gone through that particular document, then you might make a call to the right people and say, can you go back and refer to the document that I shared or the email I've written? And can we make sure that you understand it the way it should be, organized, the work should be organized or the work should be approached with? And can we make sure we understand the strategies that work in the best interest of all the stakeholders involved? That's how I think what you're saying, write an email, share details, then follow up by personal conversations, either face to face or through a telephonic call. Okay. Yeah, grapevine is the kind of rumor mill that you have. This is not official communication, but grapevine is very fast. Word of mouth, it just spreads one from one person to another person. I mean, rumors can spread like wildfire. So make sure you're not saying stuff which can be misconstrued, and people get it wrong and they start talking about it, and it can demoralize employees. Grapevine is very, very fast. Damage control is extremely difficult. So make sure your team gets it. Don't send a sense of panic in the team, because grapevine and rumors, they spread very fast and they do a lot of damage. Non-verbal cues. So basically, it's not just about what you're saying, but how you say it. Your passion, your sense of urgency, the significance of what is being discussed is also communicated by how you say it. It's also called as paralanguage. You can use gestures, you can use body language, the posture, everything, the eye contact. All these things have a strong influence. That's why face-to-face communication is so powerful, because the way you say it, the intonation, the voice inflection, the choice of words, and the body language itself, the eye contact that you are making with your receiver, and the gestures that you're making, all that is a fascinating thing, because it makes communication complete. And obviously, the opposite person is like impressed or overawed, or all that kind of impressions are possible when you use richer communication channels like face-to-face communication. So how you say something is what we call as paralanguage, including the body language, eye contact, posture, and gestures that you're using. Communication barriers. There are a lot of communication barriers that you might want to discuss, and why is communication so difficult, and is continues to be a challenge, however hard you try, is because of filtering. For example, you're saying something, I just don't want to listen to the entire thing. I filter. So I could just filter whatever you're saying. I'll take whatever I want to listen from you. Selective perception. Again, you praise me, I'm happy to listen. But you try to criticize me, I become defensive. I become blocked. So information overload. Perhaps that's what happens in my classes. I give a lot of material. I'm speaking at a rapid clip. I'm discussing a lot of slides. Sometimes it can be an information overload. But if it was in the class as a physical setting, I get to see you. I can look at your facial expressions. I can look at all the nonverbal communication from your side and say, oh man, my students are burdened with too much of information today. Let me stop here. Let me continue this in the next class. But now when I don't get to see you, I'm not sure if you're still interested, if there is an information overload, or if you're feeling bored, or if I can entertain, if I can crack a joke in between. I would never get to know. So I sometimes think, if you actually, I'm not saying all of you should, but if most of you could actually talk, interact, and appear on the screen from time to time, it's that much more easy for faculty to believe that we are replacing a face-to-face traditional classroom lecture, because I'm seeing your expression. I'm understanding how you like the course or how you like the discussion. I can maybe give extra explanation because I see a puzzled look on your face. If there is something that confuses you, I can look at your expression and say, oh man, they look confused. Let me go back and explain this further. So emotions, again, I don't get to see your emotions, which is always, a disadvantage, especially if I'm not seeing you. But if emotions, I keep my video on. I've never turned off my video when I lecture. It's because I want you to see my emotions. And I think emotions is such an integral part of the whole communication itself. The message is richer, the message is more impactful, because it's packed with the kind of passion or emotion that I bring along. So when I'm saying something that I want you to feel inspired with, I emphasize certain words. When I want you to be sensitive to certain things, I emphasize certain words. And the way I do it, the gestures that I would show, all this has a huge impact. Language, the choice of words. Again, you can say the same thing, but you could say it using a tougher tone or a tougher choice of words. So you got to be very mindful of the language that you're using and the words that you're using. So be soft and be nice and be respectful at all times. It doesn't cost you much, but surely you will maintain relationships. You create a lasting impression. Again, gender, I've seen, I mean, I'm not trying to, be biased, but generally speaking, these differences can exist, and in the style of communication, maybe more emotions are possible for, certain people. Maybe more emotions are not that accepted for certain people. It's something that's subjective and always open for discussion. National cultures. Uh, I Let me take me as an example. Suppose I come from India. I'm an Indian citizen. So for me to be able to intervene suddenly in a meeting and say my point of view, uh, I feel it's a bit too rude. But for other cultures, it might be okay to say, I'm sorry to interrupt. I disagree. I never use the word I disagree. I'll put my point across, but I'll never say I disagree because I feel it's a bit too rude. It's on your face. But for certain cultures, that might be okay. It's not rude. He just disagrees. It's nothing personal, which is fair. I'm not saying the way I think is correct and the way others are thinking is wrong. But that's because of the national culture. As an Indian, and then bringing the Indian culture, for me to go up front and say no, it's so difficult. And that can be a disadvantage. I can't say no to anyone. So that gets me a lot of work to do, but that's okay. But that's me. Use feedback. See, even in a meeting, it's always important to recap and say, can I can I get to understand what you guys have understood from these slides or from this discussion? So asking for feedback, setting time ahead for questions. I should ask you, do you have questions, guys? If you don't want to ask questions directly, can you put those questions on the chat? And I'm happy to answer those questions. So create opportunities for employees or your students to ask questions, to give feedback, and set aside time for it. And if you get constructive, whatever kind of feedback you get, you should take action on it. Feedback that's not actioned on is not going to be given again and again. But if you take action on the feedback, constructive action at least, people would be encouraged to give more feedback. Simplify the language. I want to ask you this question, the kind of explanation that I give. See, I'm not a native speaker, but is my language simple enough for everyone to understand?
Yes, for me.
Yeah, if that is the case, then I'm happy. I want to keep it simple and easy, like the way we have conversations at home. So just because you're a teacher or you're just a manager, you don't have to use all the vocabulary that you know. Don't make it technically too difficult for your listener. You got to simplify things. And again, when we can be talking of listeners, listening is perhaps the toughest communication skill that you can develop. Guys, you're light years ahead of all the faculty. We've stopped listening long ago. Ever since we transitioned from being students to faculty, I think most faculty stopped listening. But you guys as students, you're amazing at listening. Imagine you listen to our lectures for an hour and 30 minutes. I wouldn't be able to do that now because listening is such a tough communication skill. But if you can actively listen without this premature judgment or interpretation, you listen and try to reflect on your own experiences, your own jobs, or your own context. I think that's actively listening. Analyze, empathize with what is being said, try and apply it to your own situations. I think that's where management education is so unique. Everything that you take in a management class is applicable at home, working with relationships that you have with friends, at the workplace. Everything that you learn in a management class is applicable if you're an active listener. So to me, listening is an amazing communication skill. Albert Mehrabian, for example, says 53% of success in communication is because you're an active listener. Only an active listener can be a great speaker. You can't speak really well if you don't know how to listen. The key is not to just listen to what is being said, You got to listen to the silence and understand what might be said by your employees. The key is to listen to silence. Suppose you're the king of a kingdom, I'm talking of the good old days. Not everybody could go to the kingdom or go to the king and tell their problems. But the king knew somehow he had that uncanny ability to listen to what was not being said by the common man. That's the key. So listening is an amazing skill. Even if somebody chooses to be silent, silence actually communicates, dear. You cannot not communicate. When you choose to stay silent, it communicates even stronger than words. So to me, listening, I can't emphasize how important listening is for as a communication skill. The- If you're a keen listener, you listen to detail, you listen by joining the dots, you analyze, you evaluate, but you're not biased towards premature judgment. You're not making foregone conclusions, right? You don't have preconceptions. I mean, that means you're a very open, active, positive, empathetic listener. That just helps you do your job really well, understand company strategies and policies. You know how to connect the dots, you know how to get things done. And then, of course, watch nonverbal cues. Be aware that your actions speak louder than your words. Keep the two consistent. You might say something, but if you're not saying it with a smile, people can figure that out. You're not happy. I don't know if you've noticed me, I cannot stop smiling. I'm always smiling. And that really helps for any student who anybody can approach me. Nobody is intimidated by my presence. As an assistant dean, everybody walked into my office without having to feel intimidated at all. They knew here was an assistant dean who was willing to help. And that's because the facial expression, the words which are being said, the way it was being said, were all consistent. Let's talk about technology, the boring stuff that comes in. It's helpful. I call it boring because you lose the human touch, but it's definitely been helpful during the pandemic, for example. Networked computer systems. Today's organizations, look at it. If I want a laptop, NYT could give me a laptop which is configured in the sense that it'll have the software, it'll have, whatever the malware protection kind of softwares that are there, the security systems that are supposed to be installed. They can even monitor the amount of time that I spend doing official work versus browsing the internet for some shopping. So technology can be used for communicating, getting access to data, getting access to the usage patterns, and how much time I'm utilizing for the workspace itself. Wireless capabilities, say for example, in India, Zoom is not that popular. The fact being, they have limitations on wireless capabilities. Internet is not available. The bandwidth is not as good as in the United States. So when you have 30, 40 students, log into the same Zoom, they lose, video, they lose audio. It's not easy in all countries. We take these things for granted, but I know difficulties back home in India. So there could be limitations because of as much as technology is a facilitator in communicating, it could be limited by certain infrastructural problems. Network communication, I think that's what we're doing right now. Email, instant messaging, voicemail, fax machines. Joseph was talking something like that. So you can use several combinations of technologies, applications as well, electronic data interchange, teleconference, video conference meetings that we're doing today. Microsoft Teams is a great example. I know a lot of corporations today are using Microsoft Teams. Organizational intranet. You could have an intranet within the company which nobody else can access, and they have strong firewalls that protect that kind of pilferage of data. Organizational extranet, internet-based voice and video communication, you can do all of that. Wireless communication, I don't have to explain to you guys how important and flexible that actually makes communication. You understand this better than anybody else. Discuss contemporary issues in communication. What kind of problems, issues you might have? Communication management in an internet world. Trust me, most of organizations today have cut down a lot of costs. Administrative costs, office space that's required, commute that has to be required, van pooling, transportation costs to bring your employees, drop them off, that has gone down. And the time itself, there's so much of flexibility when you're working from home. Your boss could call you in the morning, he could call you late night, he could have meetings all day. And because he knows you're not moving from the house, you're quarantined, and you're not actually commuting to go from campus to campus or office to office, you're available like 24/7. Keep doing more work. So technology gets you to cut down costs and cut down transportation costs, administrative costs, say overhead costs, maybe including meetings. Today we don't have food being served, beverages being served, or coffee, caffeine being served. So you're cutting down plenty of costs, getting more work done. You can add responsibilities. All that's possible because of technology. And then, of course, you're causing stress as well. Managing the organization's knowledge resources has been possible because of technology again. Keeping in touch with customers. Well, this is something interesting which I want to tell you something of a corporate example. For example, General Electric sells MRI machines to clinics and hospitals. An MRI machine is used for scanning, right? It's an MRI scanning machine. So GE, General Electric, the company, sells these scanning machines to hospitals and clinics and these kind of medical places. So what General Electric does, they collect usage data from each of these equipment that's been installed in clinics and hospitals. Once they're collecting real-time usage data, how many times the MRI machine has been used every month, every week, every year. And when a threshold limit hits in terms of how many times it's being used, they precisely know. They come and knock your door and say, this particular equipment requires service. It requires replacement of certain parts. That's been possible because technology is communicating back the amount of usage of a particular equipment. Before the equipment breaks down, General Electric, service staff, technical staff will knock on your door with replacement parts, and then make sure they service your equipment and you don't have issues with breakdown. So communicating with customers, communicating with your suppliers, communicating with your stakeholders, everything is that much more easy, more spontaneous, more real time because of technology. Getting employee input, like suppose you have a lot of surveys that are anonymous. You can ask for feedback without having to collect details of who the employee is, the employee ID code, or the employee department details. You don't have to collect my name. You don't have to ask my employee ID or not my other details, personal details. It might be an anonymous survey that I'm happy to give my opinions, suggestions, and honest feedback. And that feedback is really useful because I don't feel intimidated. I'll give an honest feedback. So there are real good things that can happen because you're using technology to stay connected with your employees or other stakeholders. But the key is communicating ethically. You don't want to say stuff and you don't want to ask questions which violate those ethical norms. So see, legal security issues. See, there could be a lot of. I don't know if you're aware of it. Cybersecurity issues are there for every kind of organization, whether it's banks, financial institutions, educational institutions like ours. I receive a lot of spam emails, crazy kind of emails that the dean is asking for, code from an Apple card. I mean, why does my dean want me to go buy an Apple recharge card or an ID card or whatever, and I have to share the number with him? These kind of phishing email or spam emails can happen to educational institutions. You can imagine about financial institutions, insurance companies, banking companies. A lot of security issues that are there. A lack of personal interaction, like today's class, for example, we try to have that personal touch. I can keep asking questions. You were gracious enough to answer those questions. But if it would be great if we met, in real time. We miss those long discussions we have in the walkways in NYIT. To be honest, that was something that I enjoyed at Abu Dhabi campus. We are small, and I knew every student, and we met often. We didn't have to meet in a formal setting like in a classroom. And in the walkways, we had those wonderful interactive discussions, great idea exchange, great opportunities being discussed, plenty of initiatives that the School of Management had that I could share with them and kind of reinforce that and make sure there is participation. Suppose, for example, we have the triple platforms of excellence. We do the experiential education, student advancement, and professional enrichment. Plenty of great opportunities to network with industry partners, listen to practicing managers, and go on field trips to industries. All these opportunities, they're available on the internet, on the website, NYT website. But we had an opportunity to tell students again and again, this is an opportunity you don't want to miss. This is the kind of learning that you take away from participating in such an activity. And that personal touch is missing because we are so dependent on technology today. Legal security issues. Again, electronic information is potentially admissible in court. So you want to make sure whatever you're writing through email, documents that you're sharing on email, would not potentially get you into trouble on the legal side. Sensitive proprietary information cannot be actually shared with somebody else. You shouldn't be doing it. Don't violate those kind of intellectual property rights. It might get you into potential legal battles. So there are plenty of things that you might be watchful. Make sure you don't, share stuff that you're not supposed to be sharing. And anything that belongs to your organization belongs to your organization, including your computer, including all the emails that you have, still are proprietary and belong to your institution. Yeah, social media can minimize personal interaction. It's so true. Even in our families, we might be in a family of four, each of us logged on into our mobile phones or our tabs or systems. We're so busy, we don't even have time to look at each other. It's sad that technology can be so intruding. It just destroys our own personal lives, basically. And the more, see, I don't know if you know that Steve Jobs did not give his own kids access to iPad for a very, very long time. The only reason is, there's this beautiful analogy. Suppose you had, when we were kids, we went and looked into newspapers and magazines. I could go and select the particular page in the newspaper, spend a little bit more time, and then scan through the remaining pages, and it's over. Like maybe 30 minutes, I'm done with the newspaper. 30 minutes, I'm done with that particular magazine. But today, if you're browsing, say Amazon or eBay or any of those websites, or you're going on Facebook or Instagram or any of the social media kind of platforms, there is no end. You can go page one, page two, page three, four, five, and on and on. There's no end. You don't know exactly where to stop. There's no cue which tells you, come on, this is the end. You're reaching the end. So there's no way you're going to be able to control yourself because it's so addictive and it's so distracting that you just lose focus of the more important stuff. So the classical example of Steve Jobs of not giving access to iPads to his own children just tells you how distractful social media can be for young minds. Knowledge management, that's a completely different course. We have something called as Management 311 in the School of Management. Maybe some of you might consider switching your major to business. I know some of your friends here in this class are not, School of Management major students. But after taking my class, I think some of you will reconsider and come down to take a full-time major in business. I've tried to generate that kind of interest. Knowledge management is a complete dedicated course. It's called Management 311. It speaks about how we generate new knowledge. How do we share knowledge? And how do we actually store that knowledge and retrieve that knowledge to apply that knowledge for serving our stakeholders, for improving organizational efficiencies, of how we can improve our decision making, how we can create impacts that are really long term for our organization. So, knowledge management is about generating ideas or acquisition of ideas and knowledge, sharing knowledge, storing and transferring knowledge, and then applying that knowledge, which we call as application of knowledge. Well, that's possible either because you're speaking to each other, you're attending conferences, you're having meetings, there you have communities of practice, and you're learning from those experiences of others, or you use technology and the internet and sharing of documents and newsletters within the company or with your stakeholders, suppliers, customers, anybody. So knowledge management is a beautiful course. It speaks to the soft side, the human side of creating knowledge, transferring knowledge, and incentivizing knowledge sharing. Because human beings are like this. We try to hoard knowledge. Knowledge hoarding is a very, we act in silos. Even as departments, we can be acting in silos. How do you break those silos? How do you create those networks which help you? How do you make sure that people come out of those silos and interact and share those ideas? How do you leverage somebody, somebody else's knowledge from another department into your department? How do you transfer that knowledge from one business of yours to another business of yours, same company? How do you do that? So there are plenty of things, structural factors, infrastructural elements, technology support, and the human side of it. How do you reward people who share knowledge? How do you reward people who apply that knowledge? How do you reinforce sharing of those ideas? How do you, kind of motivate and support knowledge generation? Okay. So knowledge management is a beautiful course. If you want that course, then you have to move to business major and come to the School of Management and take that course called Management 311. Customer service, I can't tell you how important technology is in using, for reaching out to your customers, staying in touch with them, doing follow up on whatever service that you have to offer, reminding them that you're around, that you have value added features, that you have special discounts. And all that's possible because of communication. If you look at salespeople, customer relationship managers, they're all doing this. Customer is the center, and they have this sense of service, and they have a lot of customization, individual attention to each customer. And how do you do it? Make calls, use technology, use social media, and have personal interaction if you can. That's what you do for customer service. I think I spoke about it. So follow up, and strong service culture is always a benefit for your organization. Yeah, employee input. This is a key thing that I was talking, which very closely related to knowledge management. You want to conduct meetings, like here the example is whole town hall meetings. I remember a town hall meeting by Mark Zuckerberg, attended by the Indian Prime Minister Modi. He even came here and he attended a town hall meeting with Mark Zuckerberg. And I think that was smart because Mark Zuckerberg wanted Facebook to expand its operations in India, where maybe 70% of India's population doesn't have access to high speed internet. It's a great opportunity for all of Facebook, including WhatsApp, because WhatsApp now belongs to Facebook, to see that all these applications are widespread in usage in India. And what better way than to have the Indian Prime Minister come and attend the town hall meeting with him at Facebook headquarters, and make sure you're discussing India and the challenges and the opportunities that you have for technology, in India. The more number of people in India use the internet, the better it is. Education opportunities, connectivity opportunities, transferring of ideas, reporting of calamities, reporting of crime, everything is that much more easy, including COVID. Right now in the pandemic, if you want to reach the nook and corner of India, you need social media, and Facebook and WhatsApp is a great way, but you may want to make sure that you're not sharing all kinds of fake news and fake information. Might want to keep a check on what is being shared. So to get information from your employees, town hall meetings provide information about what's going on in the company, the good, the bad, the challenges, the opportunities. Invest in training so that employees see how they impact our customer experience. Analyze problems together and make it easy for them to start working on those problems. The last slide, which is your ethical communication. You should not be deceptive. Do not manipulate information. Do not be selective in what you report. Reporting has to be ethical all the time. And if you can do that, I think you're doing very well to address plenty of concerns regarding communication within an organizational context. So we are done for today. If you have questions, I'll be happy to take questions. And